This is BAWLER. Hello. I have prepared an important and interesting video for you. Subscribe and write in the comments what you think about it. US President Donald Trump is furious with Vladimir Putin, something the Russian leader never anticipated. Putin believed he had Trump figured out, that he could manipulate him easily. But recent events have shattered that illusion. Trump has just struck back at Putin with a devastating double blow, putting immense pressure on Russia's leader to bring his invasion of Ukraine to an end. This 1-2 punch could be the turning point in the war. On July 14th, Trump made a bold announcement. The United States is preparing to take 2 major steps that will severely undermine Russia. The first move centers around NATO. Trump confirmed that the US will work closely with NATO to deliver high-grade military hardware to Ukraine based strictly on its needs. Essentially, whatever Ukraine requests to defend itself against Putin, it will receive, backed by the full weight of the US and its NATO allies. And just as Putin was reeling from that news, Trump delivered the second punch, a deadline. He gave Putin 50 days to reach a peace agreement or face devastating secondary tariffs that could cripple Russia's already strained economy. These measures, both military and economic, signal something far more significant: Trump's break from whatever cooperative relationship Putin thought he had. The era of back-channel manipulation and half-truths is over. Trump has drawn a clear line. Russia must comply or face the consequences. The first consequence starts with the NATO deal. According to Euromaidan Press, Trump has finalized a new agreement with NATO that will send at least one massive aid package to Ukraine, valued in the billions. Though specific weapon systems haven't been disclosed, it's expected that Ukraine will receive additional Patriot missile batteries and other air defense systems to shield itself from Russia's escalating aerial assaults. That protection is desperately needed. As Russia's ground offensive has floundered throughout much of 2025, Putin has increasingly turned to aerial strikes. In June alone, Russia launched over 5,000 drones in a single month, setting a new record. By July 9th, the number had already reached 2,000 for the month. And Russian drone production is accelerating, with the country potentially reaching the capacity to launch up to 1,000 drones and missiles per day. Ukraine urgently needs advanced defenses to withstand this barrage. Under the new NATO agreement, Trump claims those defensive systems will start arriving within days. Interestingly, the US will not be footing the bill. Instead, NATO countries that already have Patriot systems will send them to Ukraine and receive replacements from the US, all financed by America's NATO allies. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte called this approach logical. This shift is part of a larger decision. NATO's members have now agreed to raise their recommended defense spending to 5% of their gross domestic product. That decision was announced at the NATO summit in The Hague on June 25th under a new initiative called the Hague Defense Investment Plan. Rutte described this as a quantum leap in collective defense capabilities. Trump emphasized that this money must go toward cutting-edge military equipment, not bureaucracy, and added that ideally that equipment would be American-made. Whether NATO countries will prioritize US arms remains uncertain, but this financial commitment addresses Trump's long-standing criticism of NATO's defense spending. In the past, Trump has repeatedly questioned the US role in NATO, especially if member states weren't contributing their fair share. As recently as March, he stated that the US might not defend an ally that wasn't meeting spending commitments. The new 5% spending goal, up from the previous 2%, is meant to reassure Trump and secure continued US cooperation. However, it's important to note that this target is a recommendation, not a mandate. Many nations may struggle to meet it. Even the US only spent 3.4% of its GDP on defense in 2024, equal to Estonia, and behind Poland's 4.1%. In raw dollars, of course, the US still outpaces everyone, but the 5% benchmark is ambitious. Some see it as symbolic, meant to show commitment rather than enforce compliance. Not everyone supports it. Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sánchez has called the target unreasonable, saying it would divert funds from essential public services. Analysts like Fenella McGurty from the International Institute for Strategic Studies say such a large increase will be politically difficult and require careful messaging to the public. Another challenge is national debt. Many NATO countries already carry high debt levels relative to GDP. Poland's is over 55%. Greece's stands at more than 150%. The UK and France also exceed 100%. Achieving 5% defense spending without further borrowing will be tough and politically risky. Still, Trump sees this shift as enough of a commitment to support NATO's efforts in Ukraine, and that spells trouble for Putin. The plan begins with assessing Ukraine's needs, likely in coordination with President Zelensky and his military advisors. Air defense is the priority, but other weapon types may also be considered. NATO Secretary Rutte made a pointed statement. If he were Putin, he'd take these negotiations much more seriously. And while the NATO military aid is important, it's Trump's economic threat that's likely keeping the Kremlin up at night. Trump has warned Putin, if there's no peace deal within 50 days, sweeping tariffs will follow. At a White House meeting with Rutte, Trump expressed strong dissatisfaction with Russia and floated the idea of a 100% tariff on Russian trade. These wouldn't be traditional tariffs on direct imports from Russia, they'd be secondary sanctions, punishing any country that does business with Russia. The idea, as the BBC explains, is to deter third-party nations. For instance, if India continues buying Russian oil, its exports to the U.S. would be hit with a 100% tariff, making Indian goods unaffordable and pushing American companies to source elsewhere. The U.S. has used this tactic before. In April, it applied similar tariffs on oil trade with Venezuela. This approach could disrupt Putin's workaround strategy, which relies on a shadow fleet of disguised oil tankers. Secondary tariffs would expose those shipments, penalizing countries that facilitate Russian oil exports. Over time, nations may stop trading with Russia altogether to avoid the financial penalties, further isolating Putin and weakening his war effort. So why hasn't Trump already implemented direct tariffs on Russia? For one, there's already an extensive sanctions regime in place. Over 7,300 sanctions exist, with more than 6,400 introduced after the invasion began. U.S.-Russia trade has nearly ceased, totaling just $3.5 billion in 2024, down over 30% from the previous year. Most of that came from Russian exports to the U.S. With such low trade volume, direct tariffs would be ineffective. Moreover, some speculate the U.S. may still hope Russia can be reintegrated into the global economy if it changes course. Not imposing direct tariffs leaves open the possibility of lifting penalties in the future should Russia pursue peace. Still, Trump's warning is clear. If Putin refuses to cooperate, the US will target Russia's economy through secondary means. And that hits Russia where it hurts most, its fossil fuel exports. In 2024, Russia earned over $108 billion from oil and gas, which make up over a third of state revenue and more than 60% of exports. But in 2025, those revenues have declined 18% year over year, despite higher export volumes, according to the Center for Research on Energy and Clean Air. Any further drop, especially due to US tariffs, could force Putin to choose between continuing the war or facing economic collapse. Russia's central bank has already raised interest rates to 20% to combat inflation. The financial strain is real. Secondary tariffs would increase the pressure. Countries doing business with Russia would have to reconsider their trade relationships. China might resist due to its economic size, but smaller nations likely won't. Even if Russia doesn't lose all its oil revenue, losing a portion may be enough to push Putin toward negotiations. There are other implications of Trump's announcement. His tone toward Putin has shifted. Though he still placed minor blame on Ukraine during his press briefing, the majority of his anger was aimed at Putin himself. Trump mentioned repeated discussions with the Russian leader, talks that were often followed by airstrikes on Ukraine. He's no longer convinced Putin means what he says. Trump warned, talk doesn't talk, it's got to be action. He even listed other US presidents that Putin had allegedly fooled, Clinton, Bush, Obama, and Biden, but insisted that he was different. That's not good news for Putin. If Trump no longer sees him as trustworthy, further US action may follow. Yet some argue Trump's announcement wasn't as forceful as expected. He teased a major Russia announcement for a week, but critics like CBC's Bria Stewart and John Hardy from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies believe the 50-day deadline gives Putin too much time, enough to stall, escalate attacks, or try to sway Trump. Meanwhile, markets reacted calmly. Russia's stock exchange rose by 2.7% after Trump's statement, suggesting investors believed the measures wouldn't have immediate consequences. Kremlin-affiliated pundits like Sergei Markov have already dismissed Trump's threat as a bluff, claiming Trump has abandoned hopes of peace. That could be posturing, or it could be a genuine reflection of Kremlin sentiment. Whatever the case, the countdown has begun. In the next 50 days, we'll see whether Trump's pressure campaign works or if Putin escalates further. In the meantime, NATO and the U.S. will continue arming Ukraine with the systems it needs to fight back against Russia's summer offensive. And that alone is a serious blow to Putin. But will it be enough to bring him to the negotiating table? That remains to be seen. What's clear is that Russia's problems are piling up, and not just from the U.S. Watch our next video to learn how Russia's navy is teetering on the brink of collapse. And don't forget to subscribe to the Military Show for more updates on the Ukraine war.